Evening, Mr. Lanciani, Mr. Curry, and Mr. McNutt.
Every year, I like to start off with some accomplishments. Probably take about 10-15 minutes. If the council is willing, I will give. Otherwise, we will skip right to the budget. It's your choice.
You've been here before us and talked about some of the accomplishments.
I probably have, yes. Here's my chance to sell our department, you see?
Also this evening with us is Councilor Carbone.
And let me just read the first budget before you begin, Mr. Curry. The Board of Health and Housing. Health Personal Services is $355,018, and the expenses are $52,880 for a total of $407,898.
I'd just like to mention some accomplishments, specifically the Board of Health themselves. In FY12, the Board has adopted lodging house regulations as a part of the Student Housing Overlay District. Back in the beginning of calendar year 12, the Board of Health adopted a revised youth access regulations, and basically what that does is restrict the sale of tobacco and nicotine delivery products in certain retail or all retail areas. The board also banned tobacco sales in educational institutions as well as pharmacies, effective June 1st. As part of this ban, nicotine delivery products will be pushed behind the counter now, and they will have not. The idea there is to stop youth access to those
Products.
devices. And the board also banned vending machines that sell tobacco and nicotine products in FY12. As you folks know, and it started delivery today, we have developed a new curbside trash and recycling system. Certain areas received their carts today, as I mentioned. We will hopefully be fully operational by July 1st, 2012. Residents must use their recycling and trash carts that day. Nothing else at curbside will be accepted other than arranged with the Board of Health. We recently, in conjunction with the trash and recycling program, passed a newly revised regulation to require the registry of abandoned, foreclosing, and foreclosed residential property. These properties will now need to register and give us detailed information about the building, what the plans for the building are, as well as give us a better idea of where those buildings are and better control citywide, which will effectively help funding eventually when we have an idea of these buildings, which Ryan might want to touch base with at some point, but what else? We have continued another year of Mass in Motion funding. We are now going to enter our fourth year. It was originally a 2-year grant. We will be entering a fourth year. I don't think I need to get into Fun in Fitchburg too much. People are familiar with that. That is a grant that is offered, I must say, is by the Mass Department of Public Health. As you are aware, in the beginning of the year, the Board of Health became part of a Montechusett Public Health Task Force and Network, which involves the Community Health Center up on Nichols Road. It also involves 10 other cities and towns' boards of health. Together, they applied for a district grant and received it. It is a 5-year grant totaling $325,000. Fitchburg is the lead agency. We will be hiring part-time staff to offer services to those towns that can't meet mandates and provide inspections, with the idea that in the 5th year, the positions become self-sustainable. And hopefully, it will be a moneymaker for the city of Fitchburg. As far as staffing accomplishment goes, we've been continue to be a part of the Montechusett Regional Planning Committee, which involves Fitchburg, Leominster, and Lunenburg for emergency preparedness. We are also heavily involved with Region 2, Mass DPH emergency preparedness. We've conducted over 750 retail and food inspections as mandated. We've provided surveillance and isolation and quarantine in over 30 communicable diseases this year in FY12. And we've also finally provided over 3,000 inspections of housing, which includes nuisance and lead paint, as well as various sanitary code inspections, which has provided the city some stabilization in some of the neighborhoods. That's my quick overview. I will pass it to Ryan at this point.
Good evening, councilors. I just want to give a couple of updates about the City of Fitchburg's Division of Housing. Our main programs center on home ownership opportunities and home ownership rehab. So the citizens of Fitchburg are welcome to come and apply to the Division of Housing for these programs. More information about these programs can be found on our website. I'm pleased to report that one of our home ownership opportunity homes, 45 Johnson Street, was sold this year. So there's a brand new Fitchburg couple, James and Beatrice Momignani, that live at that address, and they're very excited about their first-time home buyers. Our neighborhood stabilization plans, we're finishing up with our Elm Street initiative. The 3 Elm Street homes have been constructed, and they're just doing the finishing touches on those. We still have the landscaping to do. We've engaged Keller Williams to begin marketing and selling those properties. We expect, we're strongly hopeful that all 3 will be sold this year by September. We've currently taken on 5 homeowner rehab cases. So we have 5 Fitchburg residents that are having infrastructure improvements done to their homes. We're anticipating the finishing construction at Group Towers at 16 Pritchard Street this September, which will bring 96 units of elder housing online. They're currently renting up now and taking applications. The Housing Division recently had an audit by HUD Region 1 with no findings, which is pretty significant. We in fact got praise from HUD Region 1. Congressman Oliver is retiring this year, and he sits on a very important subcommittee for appropriations, especially for HUD, and he asked the Fitchburg Housing Division specifically for some of our finished projects, because we have some very successful projects that we've just recently completed. So we're proud to be able to represent the Fitchburg-Leominster Consortium at the federal level. Recent coordination with the Worcester Northern Registry of Deeds with Register Kathleen Dagano to assist homeowners facing foreclosure. So the Fitchburg Division of Housing, the Registry of Deeds, and a philanthropic organization, Boston Community Capital. Using Boston Community Capital's money, we're reaching out to folks that are facing foreclosure and offering them the ability to stay in their homes, to negotiate with their lenders and reduce the principal in their monthly payments, thereby making it more likely that they'll stay in their homes. We're beginning a new program similar to our Home Ownership Opportunity Program to incentivize purchasing vacant and foreclosed homes. Some of those will be identified through the Vacant Property Registry, the ones that are most likely to be rehabbed. We're looking forward towards, the state has created a new market rate housing program called the Housing Development Incentive Program, specifically Chapter 40V of Massachusetts General Law. It's very similar to the 40R program, the Smart Growth program that was passed here, except for the state is getting behind creating incentives for more market rate housing, which is very important for the city of Fitchburg. The Housing Division has continued efforts at neighborhood stabilization and foreclosure response, and we just recently wrote a grant to apply for money. The Attorney General's office is putting out some of the $318 million they got in their settlement with the mortgage lenders. And the Housing Division put in for $500,000 in grant. And this money will be used to expand the programs that we currently offer. The programs we currently offer are eligible for Fitchburg residents making below 80% of area median income. If we're successful in this grant, we'll be able to extend the beneficiary eligibility to folks making 120% of area median income. And that's the accomplishments and forward-thinking goals of the Fitchburg Housing Division.
Thank you. President Joseph has just arrived to join us. Start with page 30. Health Personal Services, $355,018. Health expenses, $52,880. Total health, $407,898. Any questions on page 30? Councilor Clark.
Mr. Chair, I just had something that I wanted to mention. In the prelim, which the gentlemen were talking about, is there still time to do that now instead of the figures? I just wanted to mention, yesterday, I popped into a store, and as someone was coming out and I was going in, they said, "I can't buy my cigars in here anymore because the city of Fitchburg did blah, blah, and I went, what? And he said basically that they banned tobacco sales in pharmacies, CVS, one of those pharmacies too. Have you received any backlash from the pharmacies about this particular item, or is it something that is so far been very quiet and not gotten out there?
This was
I got to
actually,
admit, I didn't know about it.
this was actually part of a collaborative effort just recently with the city of Leominster, Gardner, and us. It is also part of the Tobacco Control Alliance, which actually is about 44 cities and towns. A large portion of cities and towns of that 44 have already had the ban taken place. Worcester did it about probably a year ago. Boston probably a little bit before that. Backlash, there are several groups out there, but not yet. No activity yet.
And it's just pharmacies?
Just pharmacies. Pharmacies and educational facilities, but that wasn't an issue as our educational facilities did not sell tobacco. Wasn't an issue for Fitchburg.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
It's been a push by the Department of Public Health, and it probably will expand over time to more and more cities and towns.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Curry, may I ask, what is the reasoning for that? Why are we doing that?
The ban is, pharmacies are supposed to provide health services and preventative maintenance to health. Department of Public Health feels that a pharmacy it's detrimental to offer tobacco. It's a health hazard, and that was the idea of the ban, in a basic form of obviously. Pardon me? I don't believe pharmacies sell alcohol in Fitchburg. Not in Fitchburg.
Any questions on page 30? Counselor Hay.
Steve, just a quick one. Down the bottom, less CDBG funds, 112,780.
Yes.
It's not showing us up above where those are, which,
Sure, I can explain that. The half-time clerk is actually half CDBG, roughly $10,000, which would be clerical, principal clerk, 0.5 FTE.
okay, so,
She is about $10,000 CDBG.
yep,
One sanitary inspector at the second one down at 57,148 is
Yep.
100% CDBG,
okay,
as well as all his benefits, fringe benefits.
yep,
And the two part-time sanitary code inspectors, it says sanitary code inspector, 0.5 FTE.
Yep.
which totals 41,578. That is 100% CDBG, as well as some of their fringe benefits. They're part-time, they only really receive mileage for reimbursement
Okay,
for
that
fringe
that brings
benefits.
you to your total of
But
112,
that will total 112,780.
7080?
Is that clear?
That's clear. And the other question is,
I've been accused that it was murky, and don't want it to be murky.
in some of the budgets, it shows us the positions up above so that I
Okay.
can make the connection here. I couldn't, that was all.
I'll make a note of that.
I was trying to do the math and figure it out. The other question is, any additional employees in this part of your organization from last year?
There will, you see, boy, I better put my glasses on. I'm sorry, the line that says sanitary code inspector, .5 FTE, $20,000.
Yep.
Above that is the 100% CDBG. But
Yep.
that line is actually $20,000 coming from the district incentive grant, which is the DIG grant on the bottom.
Yep.
That is fully funded 100% by DIG grant, no city funds.
Okay, so that's the only new. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, and $2,000 of that DIG grant is for the part-time clerk for her time spent.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions on page 30? Seeing none. Page 31, Board of Health and Housing, Housing Personal Services, $15,271. Housing expenses, $1,000. Total housing, $16,271. Counselor Hay.
Thank you. These go to you, Steve, or do they go to Ryan? Questions regarding the budget for housing?
I'm sorry, could you speak up?
Questions directed to you, or should they be directed to Ryan regarding housing?
I'll do my best with the assistance from...
Okay, fine. You're showing a subtotal of 15,000, but we have 139,978, which is CDBG. I'm presuming that is a percentage of each of those positions up above?
The 15,000 is actually a city funded only to the housing director. The other two positions are fully 100%.
100%, and the housing director is 80/20 or something?
Correct.
Okay. Housing director has gone from 39,923 to 50. I'm presuming that's because it was not a full year last year?
Which position?
Housing director?
Correct, was not
Yeah.
a full year last year, yes.
Okay. And the other two positions, the housing construction manager and housing program administrator. The housing construction manager, is that individual working as a project manager for CDC?
Correct, yes.
How do we have a city employee who's a project manager for CDC?
The construction manager, and Ryan can assist on that, does provide the CDC a service which is reimbursable. We are reimbursed for his time,
How are
as
we?
far as construction projects go.
So if he works 40 hours a week for the city of Fitchburg, and he's working 15 hours a week as the project manager for CDC, how's that?
His time spent for the CDC as a project manager, it benefits the city incidentally, because it's our codes, he is implementing construction and maintenance and repair to our standards and to our
Well, wouldn't he
recommendations.
do that as the inspector if
But he
they
is-
had a
he is- he
if
is
they have a
reimbursed-
project manager?
I shouldn't say he is reimbursed for his time, the city or the grant is reimbursed for his time. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes. We have a number of projects with the Twin Cities Community Development Corporation. Some of those projects have city fund, not city funds, but have home program funds in them, and some are partnerships with other state agencies. So having our construction manager also be one of the project managers for the CDC helps us get our strategic goals and our project goals met. We have a say in these projects, even projects that we don't have direct funding committed to, by having our construction manager be a supervisor to those projects.
Whether I agree or disagree with that, Ryan, isn't my point here. My point here is I can't see how this is funded
We have a signed construction management agreement with the CDC.
Okay, so the CDC pays the city of Fitchburg,
Correct.
and that money then goes back into,
The home program.
which pays 100% of his salary?
Yes.
Counselor, if I may,
Sure.
the housing construction manager's salary is $54,947. That's his salary for full-time employment as a city employee, correct? Disregard the CDC for a second. 54,947 is his salary?
Yes.
Correct.
That's a 40-hour-a-week position?
Yes.
How many hours does he spend on CDC matters? Does he spend within that 40, or does he spend outside that 40?
Within that 40.
Within that 40. So the CDC reimburses the city for his time. Does that reimbursement included in the 59,947, or is it above the
No, it's
59,947?
included in. What,
included.
his salary that's listed there is his entire compensation.
From grant funding from the city and reimbursement from the CDC?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that number there is his entire compensation.
Okay. So, Counselor?
The money, I might want to clarify, the money that is reimbursed to the program does not necessarily go to the construction manager. It goes back into the aggregate home funding, and then from that, every year, we take 25% to put in administrative funds. Now, that administrative funds pays all three of our salaries, also pays our delivery costs for managing programs as well.
I understand. Yep.
Sorry, I mean, it just hit me now that might be confusing, that our construction manager works on these projects, the CDC reimburses that time, but it doesn't go back to the construction manager, it goes back to the program aggregately.
Goes into a general pool.
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
Counselor Tebow Munoz?
That was my question, to
okay.
clarify the situation with the home program.
Counselor Hay?
Just to follow up on that. As the housing construction manager, does he have a responsibility to make sure that the projects from the CDC adhere to all city codes and regulations?
Yes.
Could that put him in a peculiar circumstance if the CDC wanted him to do something that wasn't city coded?
No?
I think he takes charge of it and actually directs, he makes a big part of the plans of the repair project.
Okay.
He'll make his professional recommendation on for example, a roof repair. Just make a suggestion how that repair should be made.
To give an example, we have a project on Pritchard Street that there's no city money into, but the city initiated the project by requesting that this property go into receivership, and the CDC stepped up to become the receiver. Now, the city had a strong desire to see this property change. It was a large multifamily building that was
12-unit building.
yeah, 12-unit building,
convert
very
it to
run
7.
down, run by a very negligent landlord who's currently in prison. So our construction manager serves as the project supervisor for this project. He wrote the scope of work to determine the rehab. Then the CDC hires an architect. Now, this architect has, sometimes differing opinions and has put in change orders. These change orders, in one situation, amounted to $40,000 worth of additional work. Our construction manager was able to review that and determine that these were not exactly warranted change orders and saved $40,000 that typically would have, the CDC might have deferred to the architect, and that would have been a large cost overrun. So we find value engineering by having somebody who has a lot of experience with this, doing construction and rehab work, that the CDC doesn't have that experience. So it's a partnership. We do a lot of projects with them.
Before we entered into this partnership, would the CDC have just hired out a project manager?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the...
If we didn't have this
It's possible, yes,
partnership,
They could have done that, but the property that he's referring to was placed in receivership. The Board of Health brought it to Housing Court to take it away from the landlord, who was, so the CDC was appointed as essentially to take over as the owner and get this property back up to code. So it was to the city's benefit to get the service and get these repairs done without making huge loans on this property, which in turn the property would never be worth. So there was a benefit to it, him in being involved, if that makes sense.
if we didn't have the CDC, would there be enough work for this gentleman to have a 40-hour position with the city of Fitchburg?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Then how, I just don't see how he works for the city and for the CDC, and if there's enough work without the CDC, something's going by the boards then.
There's nothing going by the boards, Counselor. We have a number of projects with the CDC. So it's actually a effort at force multiplication and to have our construction manager work with the CDC and come up, I mean, this helps the city retain oversight over CDC projects. We have somebody
The city
from
would have, the city would
visiting
have
projects
oversight,
every
the city
single
would
day.
have oversight anyway. Am I not correct? That if he wasn't working as the project manager, the city still has oversight of the CDC projects.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions on page 31? Counselor Tran?
Council Piatelli, I'd just like to piggyback on Council Kay's comment. This question is through you to Dick Saracen. Do we know how, in terms of building,
How many hours have we billed the CDC, and how much have they paid back to the city?
I don't have that information, but we could get that.
Okay.
I just work with the department to see how that, the details, I don't have the details.
I'm assuming that we keep record of all these billing and hours that the project manager is working with the CDC.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, if you can provide that to us, that would be great. Thank you.
Any additional questions on page 31? Seeing none, move to page 32. Inspectional services, personal services, $369,167. Inspectional services expenses, $30,000, for a total of $399,167. Any questions on page 32? President Joseph.
Last year.
We've had one since I've been here, for 2 years.
I'm talking about the health department.
The health department has 1.5 clerks.
Do you still have 1.5 clerks?
Still have 1.5.
Okay, and this is one for the inspectional services? And you're
This
going
would
to
be an
have,
additional half-time clerk, 100% CDBG, might I add, for the inspectional services, building department.
is that half person the same half person that's in your department?
At this, there's no plans for that
Okay.
at this point.
I just keep seeing half people everywhere, and I don't know if they're associated with the auditor's office, or if they're associated with your department, or what are they going to, are we going to just have a bunch of half people
The
here?
bulk of the half-time people.
So is that the intent, I don't know if that's a question to you, Mr. Saracen, is that the intention this year, that we're going to have more part-time employees in City
I'm not sure, my clerk is only a quarter of a week, so It isn't even a half, but I don't know what the plan is in that department. I assume they would look at combining the two, but maybe not. Maybe to keep it under under 20 hours, then they may not get benefits, as many benefits.
So you don't know what as the finance team kind of thing, do you know what the concept is about what we're doing with part-time people?
No, we're not sure yet.
Okay.
I might comment it's to provide additional assistance to those departments which have a large amount of paperwork and have CDBG employees to assist with making sure that paperwork is completed. I know that department processes a lot of paperwork, permits and such. And now they do have a part-time CDBG building inspector, which is putting a little bit more pressure on that one clerk. So that's why we proposed the half-time CDBG clerk to assist with CDBG target area, permitting, paperwork, enforcement, accessory. So this half-time building inspector is actually doing building inspectors rather than sitting in the office processing paperwork. That's the idea. And it's very similar to the concept of what the Board of Health has been doing for years.
And as far as inspectors are going, you've added a second half of an inspector?
Currently, the building, Lenny Laxo does building maintenance. The extra half-time person is going to be, the building department used to years ago take care of all the public buildings.
Right.
That's being given back to us July 1, which would be given, that's why the half-time inspector's being made a full-time position. He'll be half-time inspector, half-time building maintenance.
Facilities, yeah.
And that function is city-funded, and the other half of his job
Half of it
is
is CDBG, the facilities portion would be city-funded.
Okay, so half is CDBG, which is the inspection side, and why is that specific to CDBG?
That individual stays in the target area and does building enforcement strictly in the CDBG target area.
Strictly enforcement?
Strict enforcement, yes. Basically, that individual is involved with exterior structures of buildings, especially porches and fire escapes. Has been very active at doing such.
Thank you.
He does, the city didn't, for many years, didn't do inspections of housing units, which owners of any housing units of 3 families or more are required by state law to have their properties inspected. And for some reason, Fitchburg was not doing that. Since he's been here, we've gotten several hundred apartments inspected. And again, several hundred have been brought into compliance with the state building code, which makes them safer and makes it better housing stock for the city. Unfortunately, he's going to be spending most of his Tuesdays for the next couple of months in housing court trying to get some of the projects resolved, and he spends 2 to 3 days a week sitting in the office right now trying to do the paperwork because he's been so efficient out there finding needs that need to be corrected. So the clerk will be able to help take the paperwork load off of it, and he'll be able to continue doing the inspectional and court enforcement activities that.
Will the other building inspector that works for the city be doing the same similar thing in the non-targeted areas?
He does it throughout the city. He does it in he does it in targeted and non-targeted areas, but he also does the general construction throughout the city and all the commercial buildings. The gentleman that's the part-time CDBG is basically targeting housing stock within the community, where the other inspector does all the new construction and any of the routine inspections that come in anywhere within the community.
Okay, thank you.
And he's been very effective at enforcement of people not pulling building permits and not doing jobs correctly. It's been a great help to the inspectional services for those duties, something we've never really been able to do.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, just for my own clarification, the part-time clerk that's being added, that's not a position that's been filled already, has it?
It has not been filled yet.
Okay. We're waiting until this goes through, okay.
It's CDBG funded for next year, and it can only be used for CDBG targeted neighborhoods, so we're waiting until fiscal year to...
Thank you. Councilor Bean.
Years ago, I remember one of the budget hearings, building inspector, not recently, 10 years ago. So that, if they could bring on another building inspector, that's clearly, that could easily bring in fees to cover their salary because there's so much need for that. Now, I don't know if that's still the case today, whether you're able to keep up with all the inspections with the staff you have and that, but what is the status today, and what are the receipts coming in? I mean, are we missing money because we're not inspecting out there because we don't have inspectors? Would adding an inspector, would that cover the cost? Is there a way to maybe do a enterprise fund or some way to be able to do that? Because the last thing you want to do is not have people get inspected, or have them wait because there's not staff out there. So, you know, if there is a revenue stream out there to support additional staff, you know, is a proposal, has it been a proposal to come forward to the mayor or the council to look at that? I mean, I remember 20 years ago being that way, and unfortunately, it sounds like it's still the same way today.
Right. I keep bringing it to Steve as my direct supervisor that I would love to have another inspector. John, who's our part-time inspector, is bringing in more revenue, which, because it's him bringing it in, it goes back to CBDG funding.
Because he's a CDBG employee.
He's CDBG funded, so all the revenue that he brings in goes back into CDBG.
He's nearly paid half of his position in fines alone, never mind permits.
Right. I thought that goes into the general fund, so.
Not CDBG funded. That goes back to CDBG.
Through Mr. Chairman to Mr. Saracen, if someone comes up for a permit or fees, if it's city, wouldn't it go right into the general fund?
I would think if it's a normal license or permit, it would go in the general fund, but if it was something beyond that normal scope that involves CDBG, then that would go to like a fine. I know we've set up the system so that the fines go to block grant. And just so you know, through mid-May, the department has done very well. They're at 100% of projection for this year. 329,000 has come in permits, civil assessment, fines, licenses, mostly permits. So that's gone fairly well, but I want to make sure that the normal permits and normal licenses, those would still go in the general fund.
Normal permits, normal licenses don't go through the CDBG funded person. They go through the rest of us, and that money all goes to general fund. The CDBG funded position, when he issues, he doesn't issue building permits necessarily. He issues civil assessments when he comes and your building is, you're working without a permit in the target neighborhood, or, you know, what he's leveling in assessments and we're collecting is would more than pay his position.
Right.
But we're still several hundred apartments behind, if not thousands, what need to be inspected.
Right. So bringing on another inspector would easily, if you had another inspector, you could easily cover those costs with the work that's out there with the fees and fines attached to it. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
Easily.
So
And we've told
Mr. Saracen said your projection was 300?
329,
They brought in over 300,000 to date.
To date?
Right.
Okay. And how do you see the next, are we still seeing a robust, I mean, is there some activity coming in still, a lot more?
We are not in a robust economic time, and we're bringing in that kind of funds.
Right, that's...
And we're still missing a lot of opportunities to collect the revenues that we should be.
Okay.
There are still a lot of people working that don't pull permits, so we're missing out on the fees, we're missing out on the inspections. We don't know what's happening to the quality of the housing stock if we don't get an opportunity to inspect.
I think it's an area that we should look at, hopefully the city will look at it and deal with. My second question is similar to that. Can you, online, how much can you pull a building, can you do any of this stuff online? Like in other cities, much of it's online so that you can cut down the paperwork?
Not yet. I have been pushing with IT, and we're trying to get to that point.
It makes you more business-friendly, it allows people to get more confident going forward with the application, saying, why should I go there? I'm just going to wait 3 weeks. I'm just telling you what I hear, so.
We hear that every day, and we are trying. If there was a way I could do it tomorrow, it would have been done.
But there are many cities that do it, and I don't know if there's ways to kind of look at best practices, look what they do and see how they do it. But I would think that we want to look at, and the second one is, I don't think we can do it, but we can't take payment by credit card for these permits.
Yet.
Yes, we can?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
That is, last week, an email went around about what departments
Right, I
can.
instituted it, yeah, I asked the mayor, yeah.
We've been asking for that process. That's,
Okay.
As well.
I'm just trying to make it more business-friendly, and also to allow us to bring more revenue in that we know is out there that we're not capturing. So as long as you're working on that, anything I can do, let me know.
our goals, my goal personally within the building department is to get it operational this summer so that people can apply online without having to come in. That takes some resolution of issues there's the stumbling blocks with software that different departments are using, we're trying to get through. The treasurer's office, we have to get through the point where we can accept credit cards.
Right.
Payment. There's a lot of things we're working with other communities, trying to find out how they're doing it, how we can get to that point. We're all trying very hard to get there. I would love to see it this year. I would love to see us get better compliance with people pulling permits. If they don't, well, hopefully we'll get better at catching them and getting our civil assessments out of them, but it doesn't help anybody to be civil assessing people. If we can get inspections out there that need to be done, if we can get the housing stock improved.
I'm not saying everybody's going to go online, but you know as well as I do that there are some folks that want something done today and they don't want to wait 3 weeks and they'll just do it. And so if you had the online process, cut down on your paperwork, cut down on the clerical paperwork, speed things up, make it more business friendly. So anything, and again, there were cities out there that do it all over the Commonwealth that
No, I agree.
we should be doing it too. I think Leominster does it, so.
A lot of communities are doing it. We're getting closer. Hopefully, I don't see it this fiscal year by July 1, but I definitely see it this summer.
Okay, look forward to hearing more about it. Thank you.
We've actually attended together as a permit tracking, which we currently have installed, and how to improve and advance that. So that's something that's definitely.
I assume you see handhelds with your inspectors and all that.
I mean, getting into this century would be a tremendous idea. I totally agree.
We see it, and you'll see, if you've looked at our budget, you'll see we haven't spent all our office expenses. We're looking at, we've kept some money there, hoping that we were at the point that we could commit the rest of that funds this year to get those types of things that we need. I don't know that we'll do it in June, but we're hoping this summer to be, you'll see inspectors out on the street with their notebooks, doing inspections instead of sitting 2 and 3 hours a day in the office doing paperwork input of permits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Thibault Munoz.
So I guess my question, I don't know if it's directed towards you, Mr. Curry, or through you to Mr. Saracen, but when you guys say the money goes back to CDBG, and it's a community development block grant, so it's a grant, which means it gives money. So I'm not sure how it's able to be its entity that receives money. So could you just explain
Comes
to
with a
me
lot
how
of
that?
HUD regulations, and part of the regulations require certain activities must go back to the actual grant, and that is one of them.
Grant activities?
Some of the grant activities.
Okay. Do you know which grant activities they go for in that
There's a
case?
page booklet about this thick of activities, which are reimbursable and which aren't, and I'm not strong and familiar with that novel yet, but there are, Mr. Cassasser and Mr. McNutt are Mr. Cassasser is very strong and familiar with it, and Ryan himself is learning it.
So they decide where that money, when it comes back, and where it goes within the funded programs of CDBG, or is there a specific funded arm of that grant that it goes to?
Counselor, Mr. Saracen has an answer for that.
Oh, good, thank you.
The block grant, CDBG money, there's an entitlement, let's say $1 million a year, but there's also program income, and these are payments that are, people make payments on loans that may have been borrowed and interest, and that comes into the pot, and then that gets reappropriated. So that's why when you appropriate the block grant, usually it shows the entitlement plus program income plus any program that that they've completed, and now they're using the money for another purpose. So that's part of it. And it is heavily regulated. Any income related to block grant has to go back to that pot. And it's somewhat similar with the home, which is another grant.
Okay. I just wanted clarification. I kept hearing it goes back to CDBG, and I'm just wondering where in CDBG it goes. All right, so clothing allowance, like I know in other budgets there was clothing allowances, and I'm just, what exactly does that entail?
The inspectors union is entitled to, all members of the inspectors union are entitled to $600 clothing allowance.
Okay, so that's, and then the overtime. The overtime goes specifically to the part-time employees?
Are you speaking on page 32 as far as the building department goes?
Yes.
That's overtime. The electrical inspector, plumbing inspector, building inspector get called in on overtime, they're paid out of that account. The electrician also, the electrical inspectors also does traffic signal maintenance. So when they're called in, if there's a fire, the electrical inspector, building inspectors may get called in to assess whether a building is safe to allow reoccupancy.
Okay.
That's
Counselor Hay.
Thank you. Duffy, going back to Councilor Bean's question, you talked about people who stop projects without pulling the permits. I know it used to be that when we found somebody that hadn't pulled the permit, we just then made them pull the permit, and there wasn't any additional fines or costs associated with it, so that it made sense to try to get away with it. Haven't we implemented some things now so that if somebody does start a project?
If they are caught working before they pull a building permit, the first day they're working is a fine, a civil assessment of $300. The second day is $600 additional, and the third and every day after that until they pull a permit is $1,000. There were, and several communities, double the cost of their permits. The state has said that's illegal. You have to set a set fee. We have a couple of contractors in the city who have started pulling permits ahead of their jobs on a regular basis. They were looking at the fact that if they didn't pull a permit and they only got caught half the time, it was economically viable for them to ignore us. Now they have to get 6 permits done without getting caught to equal the same benefits. They're getting better at it, at pulling permits.
Thank you. Counselor Boyve.
Thank you. I know I'm missing something here, but page 32, excuse me, where it says local building inspector facilities, could you explain that to me?
Yes, the local building inspector, currently that is the person who is the CDBG half-time inspector. He does inspecting he's a part-time. That's the position that starting July 1 will become in charge of public facilities, which Lenny Laxo is doing now, maintaining the public buildings and overseeing construction activity, making sure the buildings are up to code. That is giving back to us as the building department July 1, and the part-time inspector will be taking over those responsibilities.
Be an additional $29,972.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Hay.
following up on that, if you're taking over those responsibilities for the city facilities, does Mr. Laxo now have one less employee because he doesn't have that responsibility?
To the best of my knowledge, there are no employees handling that budget or handling the duties.
Thank you.
Richie's old position.
Counselor Thibault Munoz.
I have a question, and then maybe a follow-up if I'm allowed to ask it. Can I ask a question that was from a different page?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So my question is just, I see that the food and milk inspector, in fiscal year 12, the projected, it was 67,182, and it's gone down for fiscal year 13. I'm just curious why it went down.
I believe there's only 52 weeks in the year as opposed to 52.2.
Oh, right, okay. So that's,
That's all.
Any other questions on page 32? Seeing none, move on to page 33. Public health nurse. Public health nurse personal services, $119,199. Public health nurse expenses, $1,000, for a total of $120,199. Questions on page 33. Counselor Hay.
Public school nurses?
Back in 2006, that nurse travels about some of the parochial schools and covers several, I believe Notre Dame also. Back in 2006, the school department received some sort of EQA report that said that that activity was not acceptable. It couldn't be part of net school spending. So the answer to that was to put it in the health department budget.
Thank you. Any other questions on page 33? Counselor Thibault Munoz.
it says school nurses, there's multiple nurses?
School nurses, at one time there was multiple, that is just one person now.
And they go to parochial schools?
Correct.
I'm just out of curiosity, I've never met the public health nurse. What is her or his role in, for the city?
The public health nurse usually deals with communicable disease, tracking, surveillance, isolation. She investigates somewhere 30 to 60 cases a year of communicable disease. She also inspects tattoo parlors. We have 4 in the city. She is heavily involved with emergency preparedness, Region 2, as well as I mentioned earlier, Region 2 through Worcester, and our local MRPC, which is Leominster, Fitchburg, and Lunenburg. And I think there are some other duties, but I'm drawing a blank at this point. But
Thank you.
you have met the public health nurse.
Have I?
Yes.
Okay.
Counselor Calberni.
Thank you. There are several
I see her
floating
face.
nurses, correct?
There are several, I'm sorry?
Like floating nurses that go to the different schools?
Correct, but those
Are
aren't
they not paid out of
the Board of Health budget. They're out of the school department budget.
that? Thank you.
Any other questions on page 33? Counselor Thibault Munoz.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear, so now that I have you here, and you can explain to me. So, the school nurse in parochial schools, that's something that is mandated by the state or the federal government for us to be able to provide?
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions on page 33? Seeing none, we move on to page 34. Building care and maintenance. City Hall maintenance, $124,795. Other buildings, $12,000. Total building care and maintenance, $136,795. Questions on page 34? Counselor Caddy?
You're going to be in charge of facilities as of July 1st.
One of my employees is, yes. So ultimately, Steve is.
This is going to be a complaint.
Okay?
In the last 3 or 4 years, I've seen the condition of City Hall get much worse than I thought it could ever get. What's our plans for City Hall? I mean, it could use a lot of things, but, basic painting and flooring, and it's deplorable. It's actually embarrassing.
Look at the public safety end of it first.
My first, I have a couple of priorities that are my first, and I'm not sure which is more important. Probably the fire alarm system in this building that doesn't work because it's been written up by the fire department is my first. That's going to take next year's budget and probably the year after's and the year after's just to fix that. We also have a broken truss in the roof that 13 years ago, was recommended to be fixed, which hasn't been fixed yet. Why the roof hasn't fallen on anybody in here, I'm not sure. But that's the second area that I need to look at. And then we got to look at the sprinkler system in the building has some serious issues to it. The fire escape has not been inspected in several years and will fail when it's inspected.
What's the cost of all of this?
We have provided those numbers in the capital improvement budget that will be out, I assume, in a couple of weeks. But we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So you're saying our fire alarm system isn't working?
We don't have a fire alarm
Our
system.
sprinkler system has problems. I mean, what if this building ever burned? What would we ever do if this building burned? Everything we have that's in this building.
Hopefully, someone will see it and the fire department will come and save it. But if it was to burn tonight, I don't know. The sprinkler system should suppress the fire. And if the sprinkler system flows water, the fire department gets an alarm. But that's the only thing that tells them there's a fire in the building. We have looked at our best estimates on a fire alarm system in this building are around $40,000. The sprinkler system, it's more the fact that this sprinkler system can leak back into the public drinking supply, so that's a fairly inexpensive.
That's a backflow.
When you look at, the backflow is an issue. The fire escape on this building has not been inspected. I can't find records that it's been inspected in many years. State law says it's got to be inspected every 5 years and brought into compliance. That's the only way. One of the two required means of egress for the third and fourth floor out of this building in the event of a fire. And the broken truss, the engineer in 1999 said it should be repaired right away, and it hasn't been yet.
So what you're telling me, the cosmetics are going to take a back seat to the...
The cosmetics are going to take a back...
So at what point does the city say, it's time, because the neglect of this building has been years? At what point do we say, it's time? It's time to fix the roof, make sure the sprinkler system works, the fire system works, and do some general maintenance to the building. When do we do that? You can't put it off. You said you're going to take our budget for the next 3 years. We can't keep doing that. Something's
When I
going to...
have the building under my authority July 1, I'll be in chatting with you about how to get some money from
I'm
it.
sure we'll be looking for money.
Until then,
Well, I would support it wholeheartedly. It's
until
time.
then, it's not my budget, but I've been asking for 2 years when we're going to address some of these issues.
We've also discussed architects and engineers and whether that's feasible or worth it to get us a full scope of what all of the needs are in the building.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, just so I'm clear, did you say that the fire alarm system in here is not working properly?
Go pull a box, nothing happened.
How long has that not been working?
Since before I became employed here.
Forgive me, I didn't know that, but isn't that a problem? I'm
would
being a
think
little,
it
I'm
is.
being a little sarcastic with this. I cannot believe that it's been going on this long, because we're talking about papers. What about people? Maybe we should have our employees wearing helmets and, fire retardant jackets. I mean, I can't believe that system doesn't work in here. That is a big liability for the city, and you said it would cost $40,000?
That's the guesstimate that we got. We haven't hired an engineer to design it yet, which we need to do. There are some major deficiencies to the building that need to be addressed.
I have been under the understanding for a long time this building needed a lot of work, but what it needs is a whole new building. I know Mrs. Saracen has said before that by 2019, the debt service on the fire station and the high school will be fully paid off, which would be an ideal time to build a new city hall, which I hope would be priority number one at that point. But unfortunately, that's 7 years from now. I'm a little embarrassed to even have that our fire alarm system in City Hall does not work. That is embarrassing. And it's not blaming you, that is embarrassing to me, that is the case. I wouldn't want to work in here with that, knowing that. The fact that it costs $40,000, and forgive me, counselors, but this is where I try to maintain my composure with getting upset about $40,000 it would cost to do this. We have spent other things in this city for more than $40,000 that, my opinion is, does not take precedent over the safety of our City Hall workers. The fact that we have appropriated money in the past for things well above $40,000 that are not as important as the safety and security of our own employees in City Hall. When you tell me that the money is not there, or you're looking for ways to get the money, that upsets me greatly, because there is a funding mechanism. We could have easily funded you $40,000 to fix this whole system. Apparently, it's not that not a high priority right now. It's been going on for years, probably before the mayor's time, before she got here in 2008.
I don't know how long it's been going on, Counselor. It's been going on since before I've been here, as the public buildings have not been under our jurisdiction, and we have made recommendations that this be addressed.
When you make those recommendations, what response do you get?
We're looking at other locations to move to.
Which is another function.
I would like to recommend that a letter be sent. Just a suggestion to the mayor's office, with capital improvements in mind, that this be a top priority, like the top priority. God help us if something happens in this building in the next 7 years, and there's nothing to alert people that something might go on. It only sounds like it sounds like it's coming out of a movie for me. I can't believe that that's the case right now in here, and it's been going on for years. I can't believe that. I don't know. I would appreciate some kind of a letter to the mayor, just voicing our support for making this a top priority whenever there is available funds to take care of capital needs. That would be a big one. Councilor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure how long, but it was at least 5 or 6 years ago when there was a businessman in the city of Fitchburg who was cited because he didn't have the correct sprinkler system, fire alarm system, or whatever, who came into City Hall and actually pulled the fire alarm to prove a point. He was cited for that because it's against the law to pull a fire alarm when there's not a fire going on. But his point was that the fire alarm didn't work, and so it's been at least 5 or 6 years that system hasn't worked. I agree with you, Councilor Di Natale, that the safety and well-being of the employees of the city of Fitchburg should be paramount, and something needs to be done about that. I do disagree with some of the discussion regarding fixing up this building, because I am in complete agreement with you that we need to get rid of this building. It's not cost-effective, and it's an embarrassment, and that we need to start looking at ways, and we need to start that so it maybe even starts before 2019. Just cosmetic stuff that is just going to make it look prettier for a year or two, and then eventually going to move out, doesn't make sense to me. But safety stuff, that's a whole different ball of wax, and should be addressed and should be prioritized. Thank you.
President Joseph.
If this building was across the street at the bank or at the Sentinel and Enterprise, would it be open today?
No.
That's enough. Building shouldn't even be open.
Any other questions on page 34? Seeing none, move on to page 35. Traffic signals. Total traffic signals budget, $39,000. Questions on page 35. Counselor Bean.
To Mr. Lanciani, quick question. Have we, and again, we could have done this, have we changed our traffic signal lights over to LED lights yet, or are we in the process of it, and where are we on that?
I believe most all of them are LEDs.
Okay.
Where we are exactly, I'm not sure. We still have some money left in this year's budget. We have identified 3 areas where we're not sure why the lights are still working. We're hoping to get done in this fiscal year's budget with this. We were given estimates of $5,000 per intersection to rewire some failed wire. There are several others that we're hoping to get done next year, but the LEDs, we've been doing a pretty good job of maintaining, converting all the lights to LEDs.
Now, who maintains the lights now?
The electrical inspector, Harry Parvianen.
In addition to doing his electrical?
In addition to, yes.
Okay. Just aside, who sets the timing for them? I mean, who determines the timing for those?
I'm not sure. Harry does all of our maintenance on them.
Okay. I always ask you, somebody approached me, like, you know, you go to a store and someone says, those lights at the upper common are so long when you're coming, you know, down Main Street to take a left, but, you know, I said, I don't know if I can do anything about it, but.
Before I got here, there was, my understanding, there was a grant applied for to redo all those lights, and for some reason it didn't happen.
Okay.
Yes, they all need to be done, and it's been looked at for the last 2 years. I'm not sure.
It just seems to be the longest light in Fitchburg, it appears. So.
They are very lengthy lights.
The electrical inspectors actually identified about 5 or 6 intersections where wiring is failing. Some of them need to be rewired, and he estimates some of them haven't been done since the early 70s. So we've actually put together with him a plan to start get rewiring done on that. So some of those issues, and hopefully.
And that goes back to the point where Council Di Natale and Council here talking about the, you know, public safety. I know it's not your jurisdiction, but we're dealing with public safety, and
Correct.
whether it's a building or traffic lights,
Right.
I mean, both those cases could cause harm to people if they're not corrected properly. So I would hope that we would address those, and you know, for the sake of the public, that we would not have dangerous intersections out there. If they're dangerous enough as they are, never mind if the lights
Tried to
aren't
put
working.
together, you know, with a limited budget, a plan to get the ones that have the most need, obviously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve, contracted services, fiscal year 11, $3,264. Projected $14,000?
Contracted services?
Yeah,
Yes.
on page 35.
That has been a hot potato item. It wasn't, with the reorganization, and we weren't sure whose it was. We were not allowed to spend it because it was actually under the DPW budget. But we have tried to, as I discussed earlier, we had a sort of a plan to address those traffic lights that need rewiring ASAP, and that's part of the funding that will assist with that.
Thank you.
Because Harry has limited time, we're
he
going to bring in a company that does streetlights to do, we're hoping 3 intersections, possibly just 2.
Are you doing that this month?
That is our hope. We have to deal with purchasing, and if we don't get it done this month, we hope we'll be able to encumber that money and get it done with this money.
Any other questions on page 35? Seeing none, page 36. Rubbish collection and disposal, total rubbish collection and disposal, $1,875,000. Questions on page 36? Seeing none? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda for tonight is the airport. Total revenue, $931,528. Page 52. Personal services, $236,982. Expenses, $694,546. Total surplus deficit, 0. Page 53. Any questions on page 53 regarding airport revenues, $931,528? Counselor Bean.
Revenues, so that includes rent and fuel sales?
Counselor, excuse me one second, forgive me. May I have your name?
Sure, my name is Joe Posnick. I'm the new chairman of the commission. Recently appointed.
Thank you.
A couple months ago. Baptism by fire.
Counselor Bean, you may continue.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Revenue, so that's the rent of the hangar space, rent of facilities, fuel sales and all that.
Everything.
Could you tell me, or if you know, what the outstanding accounts may be? I mean, do you have money that's outstanding that you're not collecting? Is there been a push to collect? Do
We
you know
have a
what you
little
have
bit of, we have some receivables. There's a couple of things that are going on within the airport as you think about AR. One of the things is we had one of our tenants, Leap Fleet Aviation, which you may know of. They filed for bankruptcy a year or so ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago. They were into us for about $37,000 plus or minus dollars.
Pause there. So when a company goes to bankruptcy, the city does have the right to go to bankruptcy court at that time.
And we did.
So do we have a hold? Okay.
Absolutely. So the good news about that is, from what I'm told, I spoke to the bankruptcy attorney just this week, or last week, in fact, and we should be getting our full claim within about 90 days.
Good.
So that's a good positive for us. So, coming into next year, we'll have some good revenue there. There is another item that we're working with Mr. Saracen on, and there's a sizable piece of money that's identified as a receivable, but it has to do, it's a complex situation in that it has to do with the FAA audit that occurred in 2008. And at the time, there was an arbitrary change in the condo association's rent. It was kind of a unilateral change. It didn't tie to anything realistically, so we're in the process of negotiating that with the condo association, but there probably won't be a lot of money recovered there because it's not real money. Right? It was a unilateral change. Somebody said, oh, your rate should be X, and it wasn't a justified rate. So we've done a lot of analysis on that. We've looked at the comps, we've looked at the land values, we've looked at what the real rent should be. And, to be honest with you, it's very close. They'll give us a little bit more money, but it's not going to be tens of thousands of dollars, which is what's on the books right now.
Any other tenants owe you money? Anything of substance?
Yeah, Bullock Aviation owes us money, and we've been having ongoing discussions with Rick to get him to pay his bills. And, to be honest with you, at this point, if he doesn't come, if he doesn't really start settling his account, what we're going to do is take his discounts away. So again, we're trying to be positive in terms of working with the tenants on the airport. We understand everybody's in business. We're in business too, right? So at the end of the day, this has to be zero funding. It has to be self-sufficient, and that means that when our expenses go up, people, gas, right, maintenance, there has to be an offset in terms of increased revenue, and it's primarily events, fuel, and rent. Those are the drivers in the budget, and those are the revenue sources in the budget.
On your tenant, so if the tenant doesn't pay you, can you get their subtenants to pay you instead of paying?
Well, we don't have a lot of subtenants, to be honest with you.
I'm just thinking about that one location you mentioned earlier. that I know there are a number of other planes in that
In terms of...
revenue coming in there, so. Or Leapreeds or Bullock or either one.
Yeah, Leapreed, we are currently renting that out. So there's another party in there, they are paying us rent.
And Bullock, if he doesn't, I mean, he must be getting rent from the people in there now, so.
He's not getting any rent from anybody, that comes directly to us.
Oh, he does,
So
okay.
he's gone, he's out of the picture.
Okay.
He's declared, he's away.
Okay.
His rights in that building are gone.
I had a couple other questions. Sure. My second question, then the overall management of the airport, I know you've cut down on the hours, I use the airport.
Yep, I know, yep.
I'm a tenant. The overall operations now is controlled by whom?
Right now, ex-chairman Walker is providing kind of volunteer oversight.
Okay.
You know, there are some issues with the existing manager, Mr. Girton, where he's on
Right.
disability.
I'm just thinking about day-to-day, so day-to-day is...
That's an issue with
Right,
Mr.
we don't have to go into that, yeah. And so, okay, so that...
So right now, oversight of the staff, you know, and again, from a staff standpoint, there are currently 3 full-time and 2 part-time folks. You know, Kit has been providing oversight of the staff on a part-time basis, so he's typically been there most afternoons during the
Your
day.
hours of operation are?
Hours of operation is still 7 to 7? 7 to 7.
So they expanded a little bit, which, with a good...
Yeah.
I know your fuel sales could be, you know, as long as you're open, your fuel sales is gonna go up, so...
Well, and that's one thing that we're actually trying to change. I mean, one of the proposals that we've made to Mr. Saracen in this year's capital budget is to try and secure some long-term financing for self-serve fuel. So one of the important things when you think about the airport is, what are the real drivers? What happens in the airport? You know, people fuel planes, right? So when you think about that activity at the end of the day, it's a huge revenue, it's a huge expense from a labor standpoint, right? So if you can kind of change the model and put self-serve in, you can start taking people costs out, right? So you can kind of flip that dynamic, you know, over time. And again, the ROI on something like self-serve fuel is a pretty positive and pretty immediate benefit.
Most airports have them now.
Well, a lot of airports have it, number one. Number two is that when you think about how much it costs you to pump that gallon of gas, you know, you're probably talking 50, 60 cents a gallon of labor cost in that gallon of gas. So you got a person there, gee, that's great, but it's always there. So if you can change that, you can kind of get it to the point of just servicing a loan, paying for the site, you can increase your margin on fuel, and then by the time the loan is paid off, you further increase your margin, bringing in more revenue to do other things. So our direction going into 2013 is try and fund self-serve fuel, get a site up that year, take a head count out of the budget, and really start moving this thing forward.
Right. Okay. I agree, because I've been down there at nights with, I've had pilots come in and land and there's no gas.
Absolutely, and it would be a great thing to do. You know, one of the things that we did to kind of prove that model out is we did do a survey with the tenant base, you know, got a fair amount of response on it. So I think that there's good demand on it. You know, we could probably put the vast majority of our fuel sales through that, and then, you know, charge a premium price if you want a body to pump your fuel.
And your maintenance for your facility, you have Hangar 13 has a leak in it, I don't know, just...
Yeah, well, that you don't have to tell me. I mean, one of the issues that we have is the buildings need work.
Right.
And if you look at the budget this year, there's some extra money in the budget for hangar maintenance. One of the projects this year is to go building by building, figure out what's the good, what's the bad, what's the ugly, address it so that we secure the structure. Again, hangar roof, you know, roof leak's not a good thing. It deteriorates the rest of the structure, you know, and it leads to premature failure. So we're really trying to take a more proactive approach on the facilities, the maintenance of the infrastructure, make sure that we've got revenue programs in place to pay for it, or if we have to, propose new ones and, again, charge fees to recover it in rent.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Hay.
Thank you. A couple numbers things here I'm just trying to check out. On page 53, you've got airport fuels.
Yep. Is that the revenue?
Yeah, under the airport revenue?
Yep.
Going from 450,535 to 596,209.
Yep.
Is that an increase in volume of fuel sold, or is that just because the price of fuel is going
It's
up so
primar-
much?
It's price. It's primarily price-driven. So when we look at it year over year, we've been at about $5 a gallon this last month or two. We're kind of forecasting it to stay in that range going into 13, which kind of increases the revenue. It doesn't really do a whole lot for us. It gives us a little bit of incremental revenue. We are trying to also add a little bit more margin in fuel so that we can pay for some of these other things.
Because
Building maintenance.
When you're seeing it under revenue for fuels, you're going from 450 to 596.
Yep.
But if you go on to page 54, where you have aviation fuel and oil as expenses.
Also, let me just, may I read the page 54?
Oh, yeah, I'm
numbers,
sorry,
if you
Counselor.
would? Airport personal services, $236,982, and airport expenses, $694,546, for a total of $931,528 worth of expenses. So, questions on 53 and 54?
Thank you, sorry about that. I was jumping because there was a connection, just in my little head. Where you have aviation fuel and oil, is that the fuel that you're buying to sell?
Right, that's the fuel we're buying to sell. So that's primarily a 60/40 mix of jet and 100 low lead. So our volume product right now is 100 low lead. We sell about 68,000 gallons of 100 a year and about 2,000 gallons of jet a year.
For fiscal year 12, you're looking at $505,000 as expenses for your fuel.
Yep.
And you're looking for $596,209 as your projected income for your fuel.
Yep, that's about right.
Okay, thank you.
My question is on the financial health of the airport. I understand that it's self-sustaining. This probably is more appropriate for Mr. Saracen, but looking at this document, in FY10, our revenues were about $8,000 less than our expenses. FY11, our expenses were a little over $100,000 higher than our revenues. That's $108,000 in those 2 years. I mean, where are we right now, financial-wise, in terms of revenues versus expenses carrying over every year? I mean, is there a reserve account in the airport, and if there is or isn't, I mean, where are we right now with the airport in total through this period of time, and with regard to being in the red or in the black?
There typically has been a surplus of, let's say, 20 to 30,000 at the end of every year. Last year, however, the airport did have a deficit. It was closer to 70,000. However, a big part of it was the uncollected receivables, the 37,000 that you may get on bankruptcy.
That was a piece of it.
And then Bullock and the other item also. So we were able to, we really looked at that hard over the past year, and the department has worked hard to try to knock that back down and try to get back to the black. And I think, based on our review, we talked about a week ago, we're looking to hopefully cut that down by 20, 30,000 this year.
Right.
And then maybe by the end of next year or the following year, you would be in the black.
Yeah.
It just takes
I think there's a couple of drivers that happened. I mean, one of the things that got us last year, was apart from that, but I know that we got a large fuel drop right at the end of June. So that kind of hit our expense side where we didn't have the revenue offset it.
But that's 1 year. My
that's
question
1
is
year,
more overall. I mean, where were we before that point? I mean, where are we right now in a rolling sense every year? I mean, are we...
Well, we're on a downside, but the worst point was, as Joe indicated, the end of last year. So there's an upswing. So there is good news as far as settling one case, and also, as Joe mentioned, I mean, if push came to shove, we could. We're more on a cash modified accrual. We don't really. We don't even go as far as inventorying that fuel that is valuable. It could be $40,000 that's sitting in a tank, hasn't yet been sold. So we've been in touch with DOR, Department of Revenue, the mayor, the finance team, and we looked at it closely this year. It was a serious issue, and it's starting to be mitigated or brought back to where it should be.
What happens in the event, like last year when we're 70,000 in the red? How do we cover that variance?
It's covered in the overall total balance of the budget, or of the total city budget,
The
city fund.
The taxpayers pick up the difference if they don't meet, no?
Not yet. No, it does stay with the fund. And if it got really bad, where it was maybe double or triple that, then yes, it would be a burden on the city budget.
So it stays with the fund, it doesn't get,
Right.
it doesn't get covered, it just carries over?
For now, it's been carrying over.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on page 53 or 54? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, councilors.